Chapter 16. He waited in his cave a minute and lit a cigarette so that he could remark on rejoining her, "I bolted in to get out of the draft," or something of the sort. When he returned, he found the guide alone with his head on one side. He had heard a noise, he said, and then Aziz heard it too. The noise of a motor car. They were now on the outer shoulder of the Kawa Dol, and by scrambling 20 yards they got a glimpse of the plain. A car was coming towards the hills down the Chandrapur road. But they could not get a good view of it because the precipitous bastion curved at the top, so that the base was not easily seen and the car disappeared as it came nearer. No doubt it would stop almost exactly beneath them, at the place where the Puka road degenerated into a path, and the elephant had turned to sidle into the hills. He ran back to tell the strange news to his guest. The guide explained that she had gone into a cave. "Which cave?" He indicated the group vaguely. "You should have kept her in sight. It was your duty," said Aziz severely. "Here are 12 caves at least. How am I to know which contains my guest, which is the cave I was in myself?" The same vague gesture. And Aziz, looking again, could not even be sure he had returned to the same group. Caves appeared in every direction. It seemed their original spawning place, and the orifices were always the same size. He thought, "Merciful heavens, Miss Quested is lost," then pulled himself together and began to look for her calmly. "Shout!" he commanded. When they had done this for a while, the guide explained that to shout is useless, because a Marabar cave can hear no sound but its own. Aziz wiped his head, and sweat began to stream inside his clothes. The place was so confusing. It was partly a terrace, partly a zigzag, and full of grooves that led this way and that like snake tracks. He tried to go into everyone, but he never knew where he had started. Caves got behind caves or confabulated in pairs, and some were at the entrance of a gully. "Come here," he called gently, and when the guide was in reach, he struck him in the face for a punishment. The man fled, and he was left alone. He thought, "This is the end of my career. My guest is lost." And then he discovered the simple and sufficient explanation of the mystery. Miss Quested wasn't lost. She had joined the people in the car, friends of hers, no doubt, Mr. Heaslop, perhaps. He had a sudden glimpse of her far down the gully. Only a glimpse, but there she was quite plain, framed between rocks and speaking to another lady. He was so relieved that he did not think her conduct odd. Accustomed to sudden changes of plan, he supposed that she had run down the Kawa Dol impulsively, in the hope of a little drive. He started back alone towards his camp, and almost at once caught sight of something which would have disquieted him very much a moment before. Miss Quested's field glasses. They were lying at the verge of a cave, halfway down an entrance tunnel. He tried to hang them over his shoulder, but the leather strap had broken, so he put them into his pocket instead. When he had gone a few steps, he thought she might have dropped something else, so he went back to look. But the previous difficulty recurred. He couldn't identify the cave. Down in the plain, he heard the car starting. However, he couldn't catch a second glimpse of that. So he scrambled down the valley face of the hill towards Mrs. Moore, and here he was more successful. The colour and confusion of his little camp soon appeared, and in the midst of it, he saw an Englishman's topee, and beneath it, oh joy, smiled not Mr. Heaslop but Fielding. "Fielding! Oh, I have so wanted you," he cried, dropping the mister for the first time. And his friend ran to meet him, all so pleasant and jolly, no dignity, shouting explanations and apologies about the train. Fielding had come in the newly arrived car, Miss Derrick's car. That other lady was Miss Derrick. Chatter, chatter, all the servants leaving their cooking to listen. Excellent Miss Derrick. She had met Fielding by chance at the post office, said, "Why haven't you gone to the Marabar?" Heard how he missed the train, offered to run him there and then. Another nice English lady. Where was she? Left with car and chauffeur while Fielding found camp. Car couldn't get up. No, of course not. Hundreds of people must go down to escort Miss Derrick and show her the way. The elephant in person. "Aziz, can I have a drink?" Certainly not. He flew to get one. "Mr. Fielding," called Mrs. Moore from her patch of shade. They had not spoken yet because his arrival had coincided with the torrent from the hill. "Good morning again," he cried, relieved to find all well. "Mr. Fielding, have you seen Miss Quested? But I've only just arrived." "Where is she?" "I do not know." "Aziz, where have you put Miss Quested to?" Aziz, who was returning with a drink in his hand, had to think for a moment. His heart was full of new happiness. The picnic, after a nasty shock or two, had developed into something beyond his dreams, for Fielding had not only come, but brought an uninvited guest. "Oh, she's all right," he said. "She went down to see Miss Derrick. Well, here's luck. Chin-chin." "Here's luck, but chin-chin I do refuse," laughed Fielding, who detested the phrase. "Here's to India." "Here's luck, and here's to England." Miss Derrick's chauffeur stopped the cavalcade, which was starting to escort his mistress up, and informed it that she had gone back with the other young lady to Chandrapur. She had sent him to say so. She was driving herself. "Oh yes, that's quite likely," said Aziz. "I knew they'd gone for a spin." "Chandrapur? The man's made a mistake," Fielding exclaimed. "Oh no, why?" He was disappointed, but made light of it. No doubt the two young ladies were great friends. He would prefer to give breakfast to all four. Still, guests must do as they wish, or they become prisoners. He went away cheerfully to inspect the porridge and the ice. "What's happened?" asked Fielding, who felt at once that something had gone queer. All the way out, Miss Derrick had chattered about the picnic, called it an unexpected treat, and said that she preferred Indians who didn't invite her to their entertainments to those who did it. Mrs. Moore sat swinging her foot and appeared sulky and stupid. She said, "Miss Derrick is most unsatisfactory and restless, always in a hurry, always wanting something new. She will do anything in the world except go back to the Indian lady who pays her." Fielding, who didn't dislike Miss Derrick, replied, "She wasn't in a hurry when I left her. There was no question of returning to Chandrapur. It looks to me as if Miss Quested's in the hurry." "Adela, she's never been in a hurry in her life," said the old lady sharply. "I say it'll prove to be Miss Quested's wish. In fact, I know it is," persisted the schoolmaster. He was annoyed, chiefly with himself. He had begun by missing a train, a sin he was never guilty of, and now that he did arrive, it was to upset Aziz's arrangements for the second time. He wanted someone to share the blame, and frowned at Mrs. Moore rather magisterially. "Aziz is a charming fellow," he announced. "I know," she answered with a yawn. "He has taken endless trouble to make a success of our picnic." They knew one another very little, and felt rather awkward at being drawn together by an Indian. The racial problem can take subtle forms. In their case, it had induced a sort of jealousy, a mutual suspicion. He tried to goad her enthusiasm. She scarcely spoke. Aziz fetched them to breakfast. "It is quite natural about Miss Quested," he remarked, for he had been working the incident a little in his mind to get rid of its roughnesses. "We were having an interesting talk with our guide. Then the car was seen, so she decided to go down to her friend." Incurably inaccurate, he already thought that this was what had occurred. He was inaccurate because he was sensitive. He did not like to remember Miss Quested's remark about polygamy, because it was unworthy of a guest, so he put it from his mind, and with it the knowledge that he had bolted into a cave to get away from her. He was inaccurate because he desired to honor her, and, facts being entangled, he had to arrange them in her vicinity as one tidies the ground after extracting a weed. Before breakfast was over, he had told a good many lies. "She ran to her friend, I to mine," he went on, smiling. "And now I am with my friends, and they are with me and each other, which is happiness." Loving them both, he expected them to love each other. They didn't want to. Fielding thought with hostility, "I knew these women would make trouble." And Mrs. Moore thought, "This man, having missed the train, tries to blame us." But her thoughts were feeble. Since her faintness in the cave, she was sunk in apathy and cynicism. The wonderful India of her opening weeks, with its cool nights and acceptable hints of infinity, had vanished. Fielding ran up to see one cave. He wasn't impressed. Then they got on the elephant, and the picnic began to unwind out of the corridor and escaped under the precipice towards the railway station, pursued by stabs of hot air. They came to the place where he had quitted the car. A disagreeable thought now struck him, and he said, Aziz, exactly where and how did you leave Miss Quested? Up there. He indicated the Kawa doll cheerfully. But how? A gully, or rather a crease, showed among the rocks at this place. It was scurfy with cactuses. I suppose the guide helped her. Oh, rather most helpful. Is there a path off the top? Millions of paths, my dear fellow. Fielding could see nothing but the crease. Everywhere else the glaring granite plunged into the earth. But you saw them get down safe? Yes, she and Miss Derrick, and go off in the car. Then the guide came back to you? Exactly. Got a cigarette? I hope she wasn't ill, pursued the Englishman. The crease continued as a nullah across the plain, the water draining off this way towards the Ganges. She would have wanted me, if she was ill, to attend her. Yes, that sounds sense. I see you're worrying. Let's talk of other things, he said kindly. Miss Quested was always to do what she wished. It was our arrangement. I see you are worrying on my account, but really I don't mind. I never notice trifles. I do worry on your account. I consider they have been impolite, said Fielding, lowering his voice. She had no right to dash away from your party, and Miss Derrick had no right to abet her. So touchy as a rule, Aziz was unassailable. The wings that uplifted him did not falter because he was a Mughal emperor who had done his duty. Perched on his elephant, he watched the Marabar hills recede, and saw again, as provinces of his kingdom, the grim, untidy plain, the frantic and feeble movements of the buckets, the white shrines, the shallow graves, the suave sky, the snake that looked like a tree. He had given his guests as good a time as he could, and if they came late or left early, that was not his affair. Mrs. Moore slept, swaying against the rods of the howdah. Mohammed Latif embraced her with efficiency and respect, and by his own side sat Fielding, whom he began to think of as Cyril. Aziz, have you figured out what this picnic will cost you? Shh, my dear chap, don't mention that part. Hundreds and hundreds of rupees. The completed account will be too awful. My friend's servants have robbed me right and left. And as for an elephant, she apparently eats gold. I can trust you not to repeat this. And ML, please employ initials, he listens, is far the worst of all. I told you he's no good. He has plenty of good for himself. His dishonesty will ruin me. Aziz, how monstrous! I'm delighted with him, really. He has made my guests comfortable. Besides, it is my duty to employ him. He is my cousin. If money goes, money comes. If money stays, death comes. Did you ever hear that useful Urdu proverb? Probably not, for I have just invented it. My proverbs are, a penny saved is a penny earned, a stitch in time saves 9, look before you leap, and the British Empire rests on them. You will never kick us out, you know, until you cease employing MLs and such. Oh, kick you out! Why should I trouble over that dirty job? Leave it to the politicians. No, when I was a student, I got excited over your damned countrymen, certainly. But if they'll let me get on with my profession and not be too rude to me officially, I really don't ask for more. But you do. You take them to a picnic. This picnic is nothing to do with English or Indian. It is an expedition of friends. So the cavalcade ended, partly pleasant, partly not. The Brahmin cook was picked up, the train arrived, pushing its burning throat over the plain, and the 20th century took over from the 16th. Mrs. Moore entered her carriage. The 3 men went to theirs, adjusted the shutters, turned on the electric fan, and tried to get some sleep. In the twilight, all resembled corpses, and the train itself seemed dead though it moved, a coffin from the scientific north which troubled the scenery 4 times a day. As it left the Marabars, their nasty little cosmos disappeared, and gave place to the Marabars seen from a distance, finite and rather romantic. The train halted once under a pump to drench the stock of coal in its tender. Then it caught sight of the main line in the distance, took courage and bumped forward, rounded the civil station, surmounted the level crossing, the rails were scorching now, and clanked to a standstill. Chandrapur, Chandrapur! The expedition was over, and as it ended, as they sat up in the gloom and prepared to enter ordinary life, suddenly the long-drawn strangeness of the morning snapped. Mr. Hack, the inspector of police, flung open the door of their carriage and said in shrill tones, Dr. Aziz, it is my highly painful duty to arrest you. Hello, some mistake, said Fielding, at once taking charge of the situation. Sir, they are my instructions. I know nothing. On what charge do you arrest him? I'm under instructions not to say. Don't answer me like that. Produce your warrant. Sir, excuse me, no warrant is required under these particular circumstances. Refer to Mr. McBride. Very well, so we will. Come along, Aziz, old man. Nothing to fuss about. Some blunder. Dr. Aziz, will you kindly come? A closed conveyance stands in readiness. The young man sobbed, his first sound, and tried to escape out of the opposite door onto the line. That will compel me to use force, Mr. Hack wailed. Oh, for God's sake, cried Fielding, his own nerves breaking under the contagion, and pulled him back before a scandal started, and shook him like a baby. A second later, and he would have been out, whistles blowing, a manhunt. Dear fellow, we're coming to McBride together and inquire what's gone wrong. He's a decent fellow, it's all unintentional. He'll apologize. Never, never act the criminal. My children and my name, he gasped, his wings broken. Nothing of the sort. Put your hat straight and take my arm. I'll see you through. Ah, thank God he comes, the inspector exclaimed. They emerged into the midday heat, arm in arm. The station was seething. Passengers and porters rushed out of every recess, many government servants, more police. Ronnie escorted Mrs. Moore. Mohammed Latif began wailing. And before they could make their way through the chaos, Fielding was called off by the authoritative tones of Mr. Turton, and Aziz went on to prison alone. Chapter 17. The collector had watched the arrest from the interior of the waiting room, and throwing open its perforated doors of zinc, he was now revealed like a god in a shrine. When Fielding entered, the doors clapped to and were guarded by a servant, while a punkah, to mark the importance of the moment, flapped dirty petticoats over their heads. The collector could not speak at first. His face was white, fanatical, and rather beautiful, the expression that all English faces were to wear at Chandrapur for many days. Always brave and unselfish, he was now fused by some white and generous heat. He would have killed himself, obviously, if he had thought it right to do so. He spoke at last. The worst thing in my whole career has happened, he said. Miss Quested has been insulted in one of the Marabar Caves. Oh no, no, gasped the other, feeling sickish. She escaped by God's grace. Oh no, but not Aziz, not Aziz. He nodded. Absolutely impossible, grotesque. I called you to preserve you from the odium that would attach to you if you were seen accompanying him to the police station, said Turton, paying no attention to his protest. Indeed, scarcely hearing it. He repeated, oh no, like a fool. He couldn't frame other words. He felt that a mass of madness had arisen and tried to overwhelm them all. It had to be shoved back into its pit somehow, and he didn't know how to do it, because he did not understand madness. He had always gone about sensibly and quietly until a difficulty came right. Who lodges this infamous charge? He asked, pulling himself together. Miss Derrick and the victim herself. He nearly broke down, unable to repeat the girl's name. Miss Quested herself definitely accuses him of— He nodded and turned his face away. Then she's mad. I cannot pass that last remark, said the collector, waking up to the knowledge that they differed and trembling with fury. You will withdraw it instantly. It is the type of remark you have permitted yourself to make ever since you came to Chandrapur. I'm excessively sorry, sir. I certainly withdraw it unconditionally. For the man was half mad himself. Pray, Mr. Fielding, what induced you to speak to me in such a tone? The news gave me a very great shock, so I must ask you to forgive me. I cannot believe that Dr. Aziz is guilty. He slammed his hand on the table. That is a repetition of your insult in an aggravated form. If I may venture to say so, no, said Fielding, also going white, but sticking to his point. I make no reflection on the good faith of the two ladies, but the charge they are bringing against Aziz rests upon some mistake, and 5 minutes will clear it up. The man's manner is perfectly natural. Besides, I know him to be incapable of infamy. It does indeed rest upon a mistake, came the thin, biting voice of the other. It does indeed. I have had 25 years' experience of this country. He paused, and 25 years seemed to fill the waiting room with their staleness and ungenerosity. And during those 25 years, I have never known anything but disaster result when English people and Indians attempt to be intimate socially. Intercourse, yes. Courtesy, by all means. Intimacy, never, never. The whole weight of my authority is against it. I have been in charge at Chandrapur for 6 years, and if everything has gone smoothly, if there has been mutual respect and esteem, it is because both peoples kept to this simple rule. Newcomers set our traditions aside, and in an instant what you see happens, the work of years is undone, and the good name of my district ruined for a generation. I I can't see the end of this day's work, Mr. Fielding. You, who are imbued with modern ideas, no doubt you can. I wish I had never lived to see its beginning, I know that. It is the end of me. That a young lady engaged to my most valued subordinate, that she, an English girl fresh from England, that I should have lived. Involved in his own emotions, he broke down. What he had said was both dignified and pathetic, but had it anything to do with Aziz? Nothing at all, if Fielding was right. It is impossible to regard a tragedy from two points of view, and whereas Turton had decided to avenge the girl, he hoped to save the man. He wanted to get away and talk to McBride, who had always been friendly to him, was on the whole sensible, and could anyhow be trusted to keep cool. I came down particularly on your account while poor Heaslop got his mother away. I regarded it as the most friendly thing I could do. I meant to tell you that there will be an informal meeting at the club this evening to discuss the situation, but I am doubtful whether you will care to come. Your visits there are always infrequent. I shall certainly come, sir, and I am most grateful to you for all the trouble you have taken over me. May I venture to ask where Miss Quested is? He replied with a gesture. She was ill. Worse and worse, appalling, he said feelingly. But the collector looked at him sternly because he was keeping his head. He had not gone mad at the phrase, an English girl fresh from England. He had not rallied to the banner of race. He was still after facts, though the herd had decided on emotion. Nothing enrages Anglo-India more than the lantern of reason if it is exhibited for one moment after its extinction is decreed. All over Chandrapur that day, the Europeans were putting aside their normal personalities and sinking themselves in their community. Pity, wrath, heroism filled them, but the power of putting two and two together was annihilated. Terminating the interview, the collector walked onto the platform. The confusion there was revolting. A chuprasi of Ronnie's had been told to bring up some trifles belonging to the ladies, and was appropriating for himself various articles to which he had no right. He was a camp follower of the angry English. Mohammed Latif made no attempt to resist him. Hassan flung off his turban and wept. All the comforts that had been provided so liberally were rolled about and wasted in the sun. The collector took in the situation at a glance, and his sense of justice functioned, though he was insane with rage. He spoke the necessary word, and the looting stopped. Then he drove off to his bungalow and gave rein to his passions again. When he saw the coolies asleep in the ditches or the shopkeepers rising to salute him on their little platforms, he said to himself, I know what you're like at last. You shall pay for this. You shall squeal. Chapter 18. Mr. McBride, the district superintendent of police, was the most reflective and best educated of the Chandrapur officials. He had read and thought a good deal and, owing to a somewhat unhappy marriage, had evolved a complete philosophy of life. There was much of the cynic about him, but nothing of the bully. He never lost his temper or grew rough, and he received Aziz with courtesy, was almost reassuring. I have to detain you until you get bail, he said, but no doubt your friends will be applying for it. And of course they will be allowed to visit you under regulations. I am given certain information and have to act on it. I'm not your judge. Aziz was led off weeping. Mr. McBride was shocked at his downfall, but no Indian ever surprised him because he had a theory about climatic zones. The theory ran, all unfortunate natives are criminals at heart, for the simple reason that they live south of latitude 30. They are not to blame. They have not a dog's chance. We should be like them if we settled here. Born at Karachi, he seemed to contradict his theory. and would sometimes admit as much with a sad, quiet smile. Another of them found out, he thought, as he set to work to draft his statement to the magistrate. He was interrupted by the arrival of Fielding. He imparted all he knew without reservations. Miss Derrick had herself driven in the mud-cool car about an hour ago. She and Miss Quested both in a terrible state. They had gone straight to his bungalow where he happened to be, and there and then he had taken down the charge and arranged for the arrest at the railway station. What is the charge, precisely? That he followed her into the cave and made insulting advances. She hit at him with her field glasses. He pulled at them, and the strap broke, and that is how she got away. When we searched him just now, they were in his pocket. Oh, no, it'll be cleared up in 5 minutes, he cried again. Have a look at them. The strap had been newly broken, the eyepiece was jammed. The logic of evidence said, guilty. Did she say any more? There was an echo that appears to have frightened her. Did you go into those caves? I saw one of them. There was an echo. Did it get on her nerves? I couldn't worry her overmuch with questions. She'll have plenty to go through in the witness box. They don't bear thinking about these next weeks. I wish the Marabar Hills and all they contain were at the bottom of the sea. Evening after evening one saw them from the club, and they were just a harmless name. Yes, we start already. For a visiting card was brought. Vakil Mahmoud Ali, legal advisor to the prisoner, asked to be allowed to see him. McBride sighed, gave permission, and continued, I heard some more from Miss Derrick. She is an old friend of us both and talks freely. Well, her account is that you went off to locate the camp, and almost at once she heard stones falling on the Kawa doll and saw Miss Quested running straight down the face of a precipice. Well, she climbed up a sort of gully to her and found her practically done for, her helmet off. Was a guide not with her? Interrupted Fielding. No, she had got among some cactuses. Miss Derrick saved her life coming just then. She was beginning to fling herself about. She helped her down to the car. Miss Quested couldn't stand the Indian driver, cried, Keep him away! And it was that put our friend on the track of what had happened. They made straight for our bungalow and are there now. That's the story as far as I know it yet. She sent the driver to join you. I think she behaved with great sense. I suppose there's no possibility of my seeing Miss Quested? He asked suddenly. I hardly think that would do. Surely. I was afraid you'd say that. I should very much like to. She is in no state to see anyone. Besides, you don't know her well? Hardly at all. But you see, I believe she's under some hideous delusion, and that wretched boy is innocent. The policeman started in surprise, and a shadow passed over his face, for he could not bear his dispositions to be upset. I had no idea that was in your mind, he said, and looked for support at the signed deposition, which lay before him. Those field glasses upset me for a minute, but I've thought since. It's impossible that, having attempted to assault her, he would put her glasses into his pocket. Quite possible, I'm afraid. When an Indian goes bad, he goes not only very bad, but very queer. I don't follow. How should you? When you think of crime, you think of English crime. The psychology here is different. I dare say you'll tell me next that he was quite normal when he came down from the hill to greet you. No reason he should not be. Read any of the mutiny records, which, rather than the Bhagavad Gita, should be your Bible in this country, though I'm not sure that the one and the other are not closely connected. Am I not being beastly? But you see, Fielding, as I've said to you once before, you're a schoolmaster, and consequently you come across these people at their best. That's what puts you wrong. They can be charming as boys, but I know them as they really are after they have developed into men. Look at this, for instance. He held up Aziz's pocket case. I am going through the contents. They are not edifying. Here is a letter from a friend who apparently keeps a brothel. I don't want to hear his private letters. It'll have to be quoted in court as bearing on his morals. He was fixing up to see women at Calcutta. Oh, that'll do. McBride stopped, naively puzzled. It was obvious to him that any two sahibs ought to pool all they knew about any Indian, and he could not think where the objection came in. I dare say you have the right to throw stones at a young man for doing that, but I haven't. I did the same at his age. So had the superintendent of police, but he considered that the conversation had taken a turn that was undesirable. He did not like Fielding's next remark either. Miss Quested really cannot be seen? You do know that for a certainty? You have never explained to me what's in your mind here. Why on earth do you want to see her? On the off chance of her recanting before you send in that report, and he's committed for trial, and the whole thing goes to blazes. Old man, don't argue about this, but do of your goodness just ring up your wife or Miss Derrick and inquire. It'll cost you nothing. It's no use ringing up them, he replied, stretching out for the telephone. Calendar settles a question like that, of course. You haven't grasped that she's seriously ill. He's sure to refuse. It's all he exists for, said the other desperately. The expected answer came back. The major would not hear of the patient being troubled. I only wanted to ask her whether she is certain, dead certain, that it was Aziz who followed her into the cave. Possibly my wife might ask her that much. But I wanted to ask her. I want someone who believes in him to ask her. What difference does that make? She is among people who disbelieve in Indians. Well, she tells her own story, doesn't she? I know, but she tells it to you. McBride raised his eyebrows, murmuring, a bit too fine-spun. Anyhow, Calendar won't hear of you seeing her. I'm sorry to say he gave a bad account just now. He says that she is by no means out of danger. They were silent. Another card was brought into the office, Hamidullah's. The opposite army was gathering. I must put this report through now, Fielding. I wish you wouldn't. How can I not? I feel that things are rather unsatisfactory as well as most disastrous. We are heading for a most awful smash. I can see your prisoner, I suppose. He hesitated. His own people seem in touch with him, all right. Well, when he's done with them. I wouldn't keep you waiting. Good heavens, you take precedence of any Indian visitor, of course. I meant what's the good? Why mix yourself up with pitch? I say he's innocent. Innocence or guilt? Why mix yourself up? What's the good? Oh, good, good, he cried, feeling that every earth was being stopped. One's got to breathe occasionally, at least I have. I mayn't see her, and now I mayn't see him. I promised him to come up here with him to you, but Turton called me off before I could get 2 steps. Sort of all-white thing the Burra Sahib would do, he muttered sentimentally. And trying not to sound patronizing, he stretched his hand over the table and said, We shall all have to hang together, old man, I'm afraid. I'm your junior in years, I know, but very much your senior in service. You don't happen to know this poisonous country as well as I do, and you must take it from me that the general situation is going to be nasty at Chandrapur during the next few weeks. Very nasty indeed. So I have just told you. But at a time like this, there's no room for, well, personal views. The man who doesn't toe the line is lost. I see what you mean. No, you don't see entirely. He not only loses himself, he weakens his friends. If you leave the line, you leave a gap in the line. These jackals, he pointed at the lawyer's cards, are looking with all their eyes for a gap. Can I visit Aziz? Was his answer. No. Now that he knew of Turton's attitude, the policeman had no doubts. You may see him on a magistrate's order, but on my own responsibility, I don't feel justified. It might lead to more complications. He paused, reflecting that if he had been either 10 years younger or 10 years longer in India, he would have responded to McBride's appeal. The bit between his teeth, he then said, To whom do I apply for an order? City magistrate. That sounds comfortable. Yes, one can't very well worry poor Heaslop. More evidence appeared at this moment. The table drawer from Aziz's bungalow, borne with triumph in a corporal's arms. Photographs of women. Ah, that's his wife, said Fielding, wincing. How do you know that? He told me. McBride gave a faint, incredulous smile and started rummaging in the drawer. His face became inquisitive and slightly bestial. Wife, indeed. I know those wives, he was thinking. Aloud he said, Well, you must trot off now, old man, and the Lord help us all. As if his prayer had been heard, there was a sudden rackety-dacket on a temple bell. Chapter 19. Hamidullah was the next stage. He was waiting outside the superintendent's office and sprang up respectfully when he saw Fielding. To the Englishman's passionate, "It's all a mistake," he answered. Has some evidence come?" "It will come," said Fielding, holding his hand. "Ah, yes, Mr. Fielding, but when once an Indian has been arrested, we do not know where it will stop." His manner was deferential. "You are very good to greet me in this public fashion. I appreciate it. But, Mr. Fielding, nothing convinces a magistrate except evidence. Did Mr. McBride make any remark when my card came in? Do you think my application annoyed him, will prejudice him against my friend at all? If so, I will gladly retire." "He's not annoyed, and if he was, what does it matter?" "Ah, it's all very well for you to speak like that, but we have to live in this country." The leading barrister of Chandrapur, with the dignified manner and Cambridge degree, had been rattled. He too loved Aziz and knew he was calumniated, but faith did not rule his heart, and he prated of policy and evidence in a way that saddened the Englishman. Fielding too had his anxieties. He didn't like the field glasses or the discrepancy over the guide, but he relegated them to the edge of his mind and forbade them to infect its core. Aziz was innocent, and all action must be based on that, and the people who said he was guilty were wrong, and it was hopeless to try to propitiate them. At the moment when he was throwing in his lot with Indians, he realized the profundity of the gulf that divided him from them. They always do something disappointing. Aziz had tried to run away from the police. Mohammed Latif had not checked the pilfering. And now Hamidullah, instead of raging and denouncing, he temporized. Are Indians cowards? No, but they are bad starters and occasionally jib. Fear is everywhere. The British Raj rests on it. The respect and courtesy Fielding himself enjoyed were unconscious acts of propitiation. He told Hamidullah to cheer up. All would end well, and Hamidullah did cheer up and became pugnacious and sensible. McBride's remark, "If you leave the line, you leave a gap in the line," was being illustrated. First and foremost, the question of bail. Application must be made this afternoon. Fielding wanted to stand surety. Hamidullah thought the Nawab Bahadur should be approached. Why drag in him, though? To drag in everyone was precisely the barrister's aim. He then suggested that the lawyer in charge of the case would be a Hindu. The defense would then make a wider appeal. He mentioned one or two names, men from a distance who would not be intimidated by local conditions, and said he should prefer Amrit Rao, a Calcutta barrister, who had a high reputation professionally and personally, but who was notoriously anti-British. Fielding demurred. This seemed to him going to the other extreme. Aziz must be cleared, but with a minimum of racial hatred. Amrit Rao was loathed at the club. His retention would be regarded as a political challenge. Oh no, we must hit with all our strength. When I saw my friend's private papers carried in just now in the arms of a dirty policeman, I said to myself, Amrit Rao is the man to clear up this. There was a lugubrious pause. The temple bell continued to jangle harshly. The interminable and disastrous day had scarcely reached its afternoon. Continuing their work, the wheels of Dominion now propelled a messenger on a horse from the superintendent to the magistrate with an official report of arrest. "Don't complicate. Let the cards play themselves," entreated Fielding, as he watched the man disappear into dust. "We're bound to win. There's nothing else we can do. She will never be able to substantiate the charge." This comforted Hamidullah, who remarked with complete sincerity, "At a crisis, the English are really unequalled." "Goodbye then, my dear Hamidullah. We must drop the Mr. now. Give Aziz my love when you see him and tell him to keep calm, calm, calm. I shall go back to the college now. If you want me, ring me up. If you don't, for I shall be very busy. Goodbye, my dear Fielding. And you actually are on our side against your own people?" Yes, definitely. He regretted taking sides. To slink through India unlabeled was his aim. Henceforward he would be called anti-British, seditious, terms that bored him and diminished his utility. He foresaw that besides being a tragedy, there would be a muddle. Already he saw several tiresome little knots, and each time his eye returned to them, they were larger. Born in freedom, he was not afraid of muddle, but he recognized its existence. This section of the day concluded in a queer, vague talk with Professor Goodwill. The interminable affair of the Russell's viper was again in question. Some weeks before, one of the masters at the college, an unpopular Parsi, had found a Russell's viper nosing round his classroom. Perhaps it had crawled in of itself, but perhaps it had not, and the staff still continued to interview their principal about it, and to take up his time with their theories. The reptile is so poisonous that he did not like to cut them short, and this they knew. Thus, when his mind was bursting with other troubles, and he was debating whether he should compose a letter of appeal to Miss Quested, he was obliged to listen to a speech which lacked both basis and conclusion, and floated through air. At the end of it, Godbolly said, "May I now take my leave?" Always an indication that he had not come to his point yet. "Now I take my leave. I must tell you how glad I am to hear that after all you succeeded in reaching the Marabar. I feared my unpunctuality had prevented you, but you went, a far pleasanter method, in Miss Derrick's car. I hope the expedition was a successful one." "The news has not reached you yet, I can see." "Oh, yes. No, there has been a terrible catastrophe about Aziz." "Oh, yes, that is all round the college." "Well, the expedition where that occurs can scarcely be called a successful one," said Fielding with an amazed stare. "I cannot say. I was not present." He stared again, a most useless operation, for no eye could see what lay at the bottom of the Brahman's mind, and yet he had a mind and a heart too, and all his friends trusted him without knowing why. "I am most frightfully cut up," he said. "So I saw at once on entering your office. I must not detain you, but I have a small private difficulty on which I want your help. I am leaving your service shortly, as you know." "Yes, alas, and am returning to my birthplace in central India to take charge of education there. I want to start a high school there on sound English lines that shall be as like government college as possible." "Well," he sighed, trying to take an interest, "at present there is only vernacular education at Mao. I shall feel it my duty to change all that. I shall advise His Highness to sanction at least a high school in the capital, and, if possible, another in each Pargana." Fielding sunk his head on his arms. Really, Indians were sometimes unbearable. The point on which I desire your help is this. What name should be given to the school?" "A name? A name for a school?" he said, feeling sickish suddenly, as he had done in the waiting room. "Yes, a name, a suitable title, by which it can be called, by which it may be generally known. Really, I have no names for schools in my head. I can think of nothing but our poor Aziz. Have you grasped that at the present moment he is in prison?" "Oh, yes. Oh, no, I do not expect an answer to my question now. I only meant that when you are at leisure you might think the matter over and suggest 2 or 3 alternative titles for schools. I had thought of the Mr. Fielding High School, but failing that, the King Emperor George V. God bowl! The old fellow put his hands together and looked sly and charming. "Is Aziz innocent or guilty?" "That is for the court to decide. The verdict will be in strict accordance with the evidence, I make no doubt." "Yes, yes, but your personal opinion. Here's a man we both like, generally esteemed. He lives here quietly doing his work. Well, what's one to make of it? Would he or would he not do such a thing?" "Ah, that is rather a different question from your previous one, and also more difficult. I mean difficult in our philosophy. Dr. Aziz is a most worthy young man. I have a great regard for him. But I think you are asking me whether the individual can commit good actions or evil actions, and that is rather difficult for us." He spoke without emotion and in short, tripping syllables. "I ask you, did he do it or not? Is that plain? I know he didn't, and from that I start. I mean to get at the true explanation in a couple of days. My last notion is that it's the guide who went round with them. Malice on Miss Quested's part? It couldn't be that, though Hamidullah thinks so. She has certainly had some appalling experience. But you tell me, oh no, because good and evil are the same. No, not exactly, please, according to our philosophy. Because nothing can be performed in isolation. All perform a good action when one is performed, and when an evil action is performed, all perform it. To illustrate my meaning, let me take the case in point as an example. I am informed that an evil action was performed in the Marabar Hills, and that a highly esteemed English lady is now seriously ill in consequence. My answer to that is this: that action was performed by Dr. Aziz. He stopped and sucked in his thin cheeks. It was performed by the guide. He stopped again. It was performed by you. Now he had an air of daring and of coyness. It was performed by me. He looked shyly down the sleeve of his own coat. And by my students. It was even performed by the lady herself. When evil occurs, it expresses the whole of the universe. Similarly, when good occurs. And similarly, when suffering occurs, and so on and so forth. And everything is anything and nothing something, he muttered in his irritation, for he needed the solid ground. Excuse me, you are now again changing the basis of our discussion. We were discussing good and evil. Suffering is merely a matter for the individual. If a young lady has sunstroke, that is a matter of no significance to the universe. Oh no, not at all. Oh no, not the least. It is an isolated matter. It only concerns herself. If she thought her head did not ache, she would not be ill, and that would end it. But it is far otherwise in the case of good and evil. They are not what we think them, they are what they are, and each of us has contributed to both. You're preaching that evil and good are the same. Oh no, excuse me once again. Good and evil are different as their names imply. But in my own humble opinion, they are both of them aspects of my Lord. He is present in the one, absent in the other, and the difference between presence and absence is great as my feeble mind can grasp. Yet absence implies presence. Absence is not non-existence, and we are therefore entitled to repeat, come, 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 come. And in the same breath, as if to cancel any beauty his words might have contained, he added, "But did you have time to visit any of the interesting Marabar antiquities?" Fielding was silent, trying to meditate and rest his brain. "Did you not even see the tank by the usual camping ground?" he nagged. Yes, yes, he answered distractedly, wandering over half a dozen things at once. That is good, then you saw the tank of the dagger. And he related a legend which might have been acceptable if he had told it at the tea party a fortnight ago. It concerned a Hindu Raja who had slain his own sister's son, and the dagger with which he performed the deed remained clamped to his hand until in the course of years he came to the Marabar Hills, where he was thirsty and wanted to drink, but saw a thirsty cow and ordered the water to be offered to her first, which, when done, dagger fell from his hand, and to commemorate miracle he built tank. Professor Godbol's conversations frequently culminated in a cow. Fielding received this one in gloomy silence. In the afternoon he obtained a permit and saw Aziz, but found him unapproachable through misery. "You deserted me," was the only coherent remark. He went away to write his letter to Miss Quested. Even if it reached her, it would do no good, and probably the McBrides would withhold it. Miss Quested did pull him up short. She was such a dry, sensible girl, and quite without malice. The last person in Chandrapur wrongfully to accuse an Indian. Chapter 20. Although Miss Quested had not made herself popular with the English, she brought out all that was fine in their character. For a few hours an exalted emotion gushed forth, which the women felt even more keenly than the men, if not for so long. "What can we do for our sister?" was the only thought of Mesdames Callender and Leslie as they drove through the pelting heat to inquire. Mrs. Turton was the only visitor admitted to the sick room. She came out ennobled by an unselfish sorrow. "She is my own darling girl," were the words she spoke, and then, remembering that she had called her not Puka, and resented her engagement to young Hislop, she began to cry. No one had ever seen the collector's wife cry, capable of tears, yes, but always reserving them for some adequate occasion, and now it had come. Ah, why had they not all been kinder to the stranger, more patient, given her not only hospitality, but their hearts? The tender core of the heart that is so seldom used, they employed it for a little, under the stimulus of remorse. If all is over, as Major Callender implied, well, all is over, and nothing can be done. But they retained some responsibility in her grievous wrong that they couldn't define. If she wasn't one of them, they ought to have made her one, and they could never do that now. She had passed beyond their invitation. "Why don't one think more of other people?" sighed pleasure-loving Miss Derrick. These regrets only lasted in their pure form for a few hours. Before sunset, other considerations adulterated them, and the sense of guilt, so strangely connected with our first sight of any suffering, had begun to wear away. People drove into the club with studious calm, the jog-trot of country gentlefolk between green hedgerows, for the natives must not suspect that they were agitated. They exchanged the usual drinks, but everything tasted different. And then they looked out at the palisade of cactuses stabbing the purple throat of the sky. They realized that they were thousands of miles from any scenery that they understood. The club was fuller than usual, and several parents had brought their children into the rooms reserved for adults, which gave the air of the residency at Lucknow. One young mother, a brainless but most beautiful girl, sat on a low ottoman in the smoking room with her baby in her arms. Her husband was away in the district, and she dared not return to her bungalow in case the niggers attacked the wife of a small railway official. She was generally snubbed. But this evening, with her abundant figure and masses of corn-gold hair, she symbolized all that is worth fighting and dying for. More permanent a symbol, perhaps, than poor Adela. "Don't worry, Mrs. Blakiston, those drums are only Mohuram," the men would tell her. "Then they've started," she moaned, clasping the infant and rather wishing he would not blow bubbles down his chin at such a moment as this. "No, of course not, and anyhow they're not coming to the club." "And they're not coming to the Burra Sahib's bungalow either, my dear, and that's where you and your baby'll sleep tonight," answered Mrs. Turton, towering by her side like Pallas Athene and determining in the future not to be such a snob. The collector clapped his hands for silence. He was much calmer than when he had flown out at Fielding. He was indeed always calmer when he addressed several people than in a tete-a-tete. "I want to talk specially to the ladies," he said. "Not the least cause for alarm. Keep cool, keep cool. Don't go out more than you can help. Don't go into the city. Don't talk before your servants. That's all." "Harry, is there any news from the city?" asked his wife, standing at some distance from him, and also assuming her public safety voice. The rest were silent during the August colloquy. "Everything absolutely normal. I had gathered as much. Those drums are merely Mohuram, of course. Merely the preparations for it. The procession is not till next week." "Quite so, not till Monday." "Mr. McBride's down there disguised as a holy man," said Mrs. Callender. "That's exactly the sort of thing that must not be said," he remarked, pointing at her. "Mrs. Callender, be more careful than that, please, in these times." I... She was not offended. His severity made her feel safe. "Any more questions?" "Necessary questions." Where is he?" Mrs. Leslie quavered. "Jail! Bail has been refused," Fielding spoke next. He wanted to know whether there was an official bulletin about Miss Quested's health or whether the grave reports were due to gossip. His question produced a bad effect, partly because he had pronounced her name. She, like Aziz, was always referred to by a periphrasis. "I hope Callender may be able to let us know how things are going before long." "I fail to see how that last question can be termed a necessary question," said Mrs. Turton. "Will all ladies leave the smoking room now, please?" he cried, clapping his hands again. "And remember what I have said. We look to you to help us through a difficult time, and you can help us by behaving as if everything is normal. It is all I ask. Can I rely on you?" "Yes, indeed, Burra Sahib," they chorused out of peaked, anxious faces. They moved out, subdued yet elated, Mrs. Blakiston in their midst like a sacred flame. His simple words had reminded them that they were an outpost of empire. By the side of their compassionate love for Adela, another sentiment sprang up which was to strangle it in the long run. Its first signs were prosaic and small. Mrs. Turton made her loud, hard jokes at bridge. Mrs. Leslie began to knit a comforter. When the smoking room was clear, the collector sat on the edge of a table so that he could dominate without formality. His mind whirled with contradictory impulses. He wanted to avenge Miss Quested and punish Fielding, while remaining scrupulously fair. He wanted to flog every native that he saw, but to do nothing that would lead to a riot or to the necessity for military intervention. The dread of having to call in the troops was vivid to him. Soldiers put one thing straight but leave a dozen others crooked, and they love to humiliate the civilian administration. One soldier was in the room this evening, a stray subaltern from a Gurkha regiment. He was a little drunk, and regarded his presence as providential. The collector sighed. There seemed nothing for it but the old, weary business of compromise and moderation. He longed for the good old days when an Englishman could satisfy his own honor and no questions asked afterwards. Poor young Hayslop had taken a step in this direction by refusing bail, but the collector couldn't feel this was wise of poor young Hayslop. Not only would the Nawab Bahadur and others be angry, but the government of India itself also watches, and behind it is that caucus of cranks and cravens, the British Parliament. He had constantly to remind himself that, in the eyes of the law, Aziz was not yet guilty, and the effort fatigued him. The others, less responsible, could behave naturally. They had started speaking of women and children, that phrase that exempts the male from sanity when it has been repeated a few times. Each felt that all he loved best in the world was at stake, demanded revenge, and was filled with a not unpleasing glow, in which the chilly and half-known features of Miss Quested vanished, and were replaced by all that is sweetest and warmest in the private life. "But it's the women and children," they repeated, and the collector knew he ought to stop them intoxicating themselves, but he hadn't the heart. They ought to be compelled to give hostages, etc. Many of the said women and children were leaving for the hill station in a few days, and the suggestion was made that they should be packed off at once in a special train. "And a jolly suggestion," the subaltern cried. "The army's got to come in sooner or later." A special train was in his mind inseparable from troops. This would never have happened if Marabar Hill was under military control. Station a bunch of Gurkhas at the entrance of the cave was all that was wanted. "Mrs. Blakiston was saying if only there were a few Tommies," remarked someone. "English no good," he cried, getting his loyalties mixed. "Native troops for this country. Give me the sporting type of native. Give me Gurkhas. Give me Rajputs. Give me Jats. Give me the Punjabi. Give me Sikhs. Give me Marathas, Beals, Afridis, and Pathans. And really, if it comes to that, I don't mind if you give me the scums of the bazaars. Properly led, mind. I'd lead them anywhere." The collector nodded at him pleasantly and said to his own people, "Don't start carrying arms about. I want everything to go on precisely as usual, until there's cause for the contrary. Get the womenfolk off to the hills, but do it quietly, and for heaven's sake no more talk of special trains. Never mind what you think or feel. Possibly I have feelings too. One isolated Indian is charged with an attempted crime." He flipped his forehead hard with his fingernail, and they all realized that he felt as deeply as they did, and they loved him and determined not to increase his difficulties. "Act upon that fact until there are more facts," he concluded. "Assume every Indian is an angel." They murmured, "Right you are, Burra Sahib." "Angels?" "Exactly." From the subaltern, "Exactly what I said. The native's all right if you get him alone. Leslie. You remember the one I had a knock with on your maiden last month? Well, he was all right. Any native who plays polo is all right. What you've got to stamp on is these educated classes, and mind, I do know what I'm talking about this time." The smoking room door opened and let in a feminine buzz. Mrs. Turton called out, "She's better," and from both sections of the community a sigh of joy and relief rose. The civil surgeon, who had brought the good news, came in. His cumbrous, pasty face looked ill-tempered. He surveyed the company, saw Fielding crouched below him on an ottoman, and said, Everyone began pressing him for details. "No one's out of danger in this country as long as they have a temperature," was his answer. He appeared to resent his patient's recovery, and no one who knew the old major and his ways was surprised at this. "Squat down, Calendar. Tell us all about it." "Take me some time to do that. How's the old lady?" Temperature. My wife heard she was sinking. So she may be. I guarantee nothing. I really can't be plagued with questions, Leslie. Sorry, old man. Heaslop's just behind me. At the name of Heaslop, a fine and beautiful expression was renewed on every face. Miss Quested was only a victim, but young Heaslop was a martyr. He was the recipient of all the evil intended against them by the country they had tried to serve. He was bearing the Sahib's cross, and they fretted because they could do nothing for him in return. They felt so craven sitting on softness and attending the course of the law. I wish to God I hadn't given my jewel of an assistant leave. I'd cut my tongue out first. To feel I'm responsible, that's what hits me. To refuse and then give in under pressure. That is what I did, my sons, that is what I did. Fielding took his pipe from his mouth and looked at it thoughtfully. Thinking him afraid, the other went on. I understood an Englishman was to accompany the expedition. That is why I gave in. No one blames you, my dear Calendar, said the collector, looking down. We are all to blame in the sense that we ought to have seen the expedition was insufficiently guaranteed and stopped it. I knew about it myself. We lent our car this morning to take the ladies to the station. We are all implicated in that sense, but not an atom of blame attaches to you personally. I don't feel that. I wish I could. Responsibility is a very awful thing, and I've no use for the man who shirks it. His eyes were directed on Fielding. Those who knew that Fielding had undertaken to accompany and missed the early train were sorry for him. It was what is to be expected when a man mixes himself up with natives, always ends in some indignity. The collector, who knew more, kept silent, for the official in him still hoped that Fielding would toe the line. The conversation turned to women and children again, and under its cover Major Calendar got hold of the subaltern and set him on to bait the schoolmaster. Pretending to be more drunk than he really was, he began to make semi-offensive remarks. Heard about Miss Quested's servant, reinforced the major. No, what about him? Heaslop warned Miss Quested's servant last night never to lose sight of her. Prisoner got hold of this and managed to leave him behind. Bribed him. Heaslop has just found out the whole story with names and sums. A well-known pimp to those people gave the money, Mohammed Latif by name. So much for the servant. What about the Englishman, our friend here? How did they get rid of him? Money again. Fielding rose to his feet, supported by murmurs and exclamations, for no one yet suspected his integrity. Oh, I'm being misunderstood, apologies, said the major offensively. I didn't mean they bribed Mr. Fielding. Then what do you mean? They paid the other Indian to make you late. Godbowl! He was saying his prayers. I know those prayers. That's ridiculous. He sat down again, trembling with rage. Person after person was being dragged into the mud. Having shot this bolt, the major prepared the next. Heaslop also found out something from his mother. Aziz paid a herd of natives to suffocate her in a cave. That was the end of her, or would have been only she got out. Nicely planned, wasn't it? Neat. Then he could go on with the girl, he and she and a guide provided by the same Mohammed Latif. Guide now can't be found. Pretty, his voice broke into a roar. It's not the time for sitting down. It's the time for action. Call in the troops and clear the bazaars. The major's outbursts were always discounted, but he made everyone uneasy on this occasion. The crime was even worse than they had supposed, the unspeakable limit of cynicism, untouched since 1857. Fielding forgot his anger on poor old Godbowl's behalf and became thoughtful. The evil was propagating in every direction. It seemed to have an existence of its own, apart from anything that was done or said by individuals, and he understood better why both Aziz and Hamidullah had been inclined to lie down and die. His adversary saw that he was in trouble, and now ventured to say, I suppose nothing that's said inside the club will go outside the club, winking the while at Leslie. Why should it? Responded Leslie. Oh, nothing. I only heard a rumor that a certain member here present has been seeing the prisoner this afternoon. You can't run with the hare and hunt with the hounds, at least not in this country. Does anyone here present want to? Fielding was determined not to be drawn again. He had something to say, but it should be at his own moment. The attack failed to mature because the collector did not support it. Attention shifted from him for a time. Then the buzz of women broke out again. The door had been opened by Ronnie. The young man looked exhausted and tragic, also gentler than usual. He always showed deference to his superiors, but now it came straight from his heart. He seemed to appeal for their protection in the insult that had befallen him, and they, in instinctive homage, rose to their feet. But every human act in the East is tainted with officialism, and while honoring him, they condemned Aziz and India. Fielding realized this, and he remained seated. It was an ungracious, a caddish thing to do, perhaps an unsound thing to do, but he felt he had been passive long enough, and that he might be drawn into the wrong current if he did not make a stand. Ronnie, who had not seen him, said in husky tones, "Oh, please, please, all sit down. I only want to listen what has been decided." "Heaslop, I'm telling them I'm against any show of force," said the collector apologetically. "I don't know whether you will feel as I do, but that is how I am situated. When the verdict is obtained, it will be another matter. You are sure to know best. I have no experience, Burra Sahib. How is your mother, old boy?" "Better, thank you. I wish everyone would sit down." "Some have never got up," the young soldier said. "And the Major brings us an excellent report of Miss Quested," Turton went on. I do. I'm satisfied." "You thought badly of her earlier, did you not, Major?" "That's why I refused bail." Calendar laughed with friendly inwardness and said, Heaslop, next time bail's wanted, ring up the old doctor before giving it. His shoulders are broad, and speaking in the strictest confidence, don't take the old doctor's opinion too seriously. He's a blithering idiot, we can always leave it at that, but he'll do the little he can towards keeping in quad the—" He broke off with affected politeness. "Oh, but he has one of his friends here," the subaltern called. "Stand up, you swine." "Mr. Fielding, what has prevented you from standing up?" said the collector, entering the fray at last. It was the attack for which Fielding had waited, and to which he must reply. "May I make a statement, sir?" "Certainly." Seasoned and self-contained, devoid of the fervours of nationality or youth, the schoolmaster did what was for him a comparatively easy thing. He stood up and said, "I believe Dr. Aziz to be innocent." "You have a right to hold that opinion if you choose, but pray is that any reason why you should insult Mr. Heaslop?" "May I conclude my statement?" "Certainly." "I am waiting for the verdict of the courts. If he is guilty, I resign from my service and leave India. I resign from the club now." "Hear, hear," said voices not entirely hostile, for they liked the fellow for speaking out. "You have not answered my question. Why did you not stand when Mr. Heaslop entered?" "With all deference, sir, I am not here to answer questions, but to make a personal statement, and I have concluded it. May I ask whether you have taken over charge of this district?" Fielding moved towards the door. "One moment, Mr. Fielding. You are not to go yet, please. Before you leave the club, from which you do very well to resign, you will express some detestation of the crime, and you will apologize to Mr. Heaslop." "Are you speaking to me officially, sir?" The collector, who never spoke otherwise, was so infuriated that he lost his head. He cried, "Leave this room at once, and I deeply regret that I demeaned myself to meet you at the station. You have sunk to the level of your associates. You are weak. That is what is wrong with you." "I want to leave the room, but cannot while this gentleman prevents me," said Fielding lightly. The subaltern had got across his path. "Let him go," said Ronnie, almost in tears. It was the only appeal that could have saved the situation. Whatever Heaslop wished must be done. There was a slight scuffle at the door, from which Fielding was propelled, a little more quickly than is natural, into the room where the ladies were playing cards. "Fancy if I'd fallen or got angry," he thought. Of course he was a little angry. His peers had never offered him violence or called him weak before. Besides, Heaslop had heaped coals of fire on his head. He wished he had not picked the quarrel over poor, suffering Heaslop when there were cleaner issues at hand. However, there it was, done, muddled through, and to cool himself and regain mental balance, he went on to the upper veranda for a moment, where the first object he saw was the Marabar Hills. At this distance and hour they leapt into beauty. They were Montsalvat, Walhalla, the towers of a cathedral, peopled with saints and heroes and covered with flowers. What miscreant lurked in them, presently to be detected by the activities of the law? Who was the guide, and had he been found yet? What was the echo of which the girl complained? He didn't know, but presently he would know. Great is information, and she shall prevail. It was the last moment of the light, and as he gazed at the Marabar hills, they seemed to move graciously towards him like a queen, and their charm became the skies. At the moment they vanished, they were everywhere. The cool benediction of the night descended, the stars sparkled, and the whole universe was a hill. Lovely, exquisite moment, but passing the Englishman with averted face and on swift wings. He experienced nothing himself. It was as if someone had told him there was such a moment, and he was obliged to believe. And he felt dubious and discontented suddenly, and wondered whether he was really and truly successful as a human being. After 40 years' experience, he had learnt to manage his life and make the best of it on advanced European lines, had developed his personality, explored his limitations, controlled his passions, and he had done it all without becoming either pedantic or worldly. A creditable achievement. But as the moment passed, he felt he ought to have been working at something else the whole time. He didn't know at what, never would know, never could know, and that was why he felt sad. Chapter 21. Dismissing his regrets as inappropriate to the matter in hand, he accomplished the last section of the day by riding off to his new allies. He was glad that he had broken with the club, for he would have picked up scraps of gossip there and reported them down in the city, and he was glad to be denied this opportunity. He would miss his billiards and occasional tennis and cracks with McBride, but really that was all. So light did he travel. At the entrance of the bazaars, a tiger made his horse shy. A youth dressed up as a tiger, the body striped brown and yellow, a mask over the face. Mohuram was working up. The city beat a good many drums, but seemed good-tempered. He was invited to inspect a small tazia, a flimsy and frivolous erection, more like a crinoline than the tomb of the grandson of the Prophet, done to death at Kerbala. Excited children were pasting colored paper over its ribs. The rest of the evening he spent with the Nawab Bahadur, Hamidullah, Mahmud Ali, and others of the Confederacy. The campaign was also working up. A telegram had been sent to the famous Amritrao, and his acceptance received. Application for bail was to be renewed. It could not well be withheld now that Miss Quested was out of danger. The conference was serious and sensible, but marred by a group of itinerant musicians who were allowed to play in the compound. Each held a large earthenware jar containing pebbles and jerked it up and down in time to a doleful chant. Distracted by the noise, he suggested their dismissal, but the Nawab Bahadur vetoed it. He said that musicians who had walked many miles might bring good luck. Late at night, he had an inclination to tell Professor Godbole of the tactical and moral error he had made in being rude to Heaslop, and to hear what he would say. But the old fellow had gone to bed, and slipped off unmolested to his new job in a day or two. He always did possess the knack of slipping off. Chapter 22. Adela lay for several days in the McBride's bungalow. She'd been touched by the sun. Also, hundreds of cactus spines had to be picked out of her flesh. Hour after hour, Miss Derrick and Mrs. McBride examined her through magnifying glasses, always coming on fresh colonies, tiny hairs that might snap off and be drawn into the blood if they were neglected. She lay passive beneath their fingers, which developed the shock that had begun in the cave. Hitherto, she had not much minded whether she was touched or not. Her senses were abnormally inert, and the only contact she anticipated was that of mind. Everything now was transferred to the surface of her body, which began to avenge itself and feed unhealthily. People seemed very much alike, except that some would come close while others kept away. In space, things touch. In time, things part, she repeated to herself while the thorns were being extracted. Her brain so weak that she could not decide whether the phrase was a philosophy or a pun. They were kind to her, indeed over-kind, the men too respectful, the women too sympathetic, whereas Mrs. Moore, the only visitor she wanted, kept away. No one understood her trouble or knew why she vibrated between hard common sense and hysteria. She would begin a speech as if nothing particular had happened. "I went into this detestable cave," she would say dryly, "and I remember scratching the wall with my fingernail to start the usual echo. And then, as I was saying, there was this shadow, or sort of shadow, down the entrance tunnel, bottling me up. It seemed like an age, but I suppose the whole thing can't have lasted 30 seconds, really. I hit at him with the glasses. He pulled me round the cave by the strap. It broke. I escaped, that's all. He never actually touched me once." It all seemed such nonsense. Then her eyes would fill with tears. "Naturally, I'm upset, but I shall get over it." And then she would break down entirely, and the women would feel she was one of themselves and cry too, and men in the next room murmur, "Good God, good God." No one realized that she thought tears vile, a degradation more subtle than anything endured in the Marabar, a negation of her advanced outlook and the natural honesty of her mind. Adela was always trying to think the incident out, always reminding herself that no harm had been done. There was the shock, but what is that? For a time her own logic would convince her, then she would hear the echo again, weep, declare she was unworthy of Ronnie, and hope her assailant would get the maximum penalty. After one of these bouts, she longed to go out into the bazaars and ask pardon from everyone she met, for she felt in some vague way that she was leaving the world worse than she found it. She felt that it was her crime until the intellect, reawakening, pointed out to her that she was inaccurate here and set her again upon her sterile round. If only she could have seen Mrs. Moore. The old lady had not been well either and was disinclined to come out, Ronnie reported, and consequently the echo flourished, raging up and down like a nerve in the faculty of her hearing, and the noise in the cave, so unimportant intellectually, was prolonged over the surface of her life. She had struck the polished wall for no reason, and before the comment had died away, he followed her, and the climax was the falling of her field glasses. The sound had spouted after her when she escaped, and was going on still like a river that gradually floods the plain. Only Mrs. Moore could drive it back to its source and seal the broken reservoir. Evil was loose. She could even hear it entering the lives of others. And Adela spent days in this atmosphere of grief and depression. Her friends kept up their spirits by demanding holocausts of natives, but she was too worried and weak to do that. When the cactus thorns had all been extracted and her temperature fallen to normal, Ronnie came to fetch her away. He was worn with indignation and suffering, and she wished she could comfort him, but intimacy seemed to caricature itself, and the more they spoke, the more wretched and self-conscious they became. Practical talk was the least painful, and he and McBride now told her one or two things which they had concealed from her during the crisis by the doctor's orders. She learnt for the first time of the Muharram troubles. There had nearly been a riot. The last day of the festival, the great procession left its official route and tried to enter the civil station, and a telephone had been cut because it interrupted the advance of one of the larger paper towers. McBride and his police had pulled the thing straight, a fine piece of work. They passed on to another and very painful subject, the trial. She would have to appear in court, identify the prisoner, and submit to cross-examination by an Indian lawyer. "Can Mrs. Moore be with me?" was all she said. "Certainly, and I shall be there myself," Ronnie replied. "The case won't come before me. They've objected to me on personal grounds. It will be at Chandrapur. We thought at one time it would be transferred elsewhere." "Miss Quested realizes what all that means, though," said McBride sadly. "The case will come before Das." Das was Ronnie's assistant, own brother to the Mrs. Bhattacharya, whose carriage had played them false last month. He was courteous and intelligent, and with the evidence before him could only come to one conclusion. But that he should be judge over an English girl had convulsed the station with wrath, and some of the women had sent a telegram about it to Lady Mellanby, the wife of the Lieutenant Governor. "I must come before someone. That's the way to face it," You have the pluck, Miss Quested. He grew very bitter over the arrangements and called them the fruits of democracy. In the old days, an Englishwoman would not have had to appear, nor would any Indian have dared to discuss her private affairs. She would have made her deposition, and judgment would have followed. He apologized to her for the condition of the country, with the result that she gave one of her sudden little shoots of tears. Ronnie wandered miserably about the room while she cried, treading upon the flowers of the cashmere carpet that so inevitably covered it, or drumming on the brass Benares bowls. "I do this less every day. I shall soon be quite well," she said, blowing her nose and feeling hideous. "What I need is something to do. That is why I keep on with this ridiculous crying." "It's not ridiculous. We think you wonderful," said the policeman very sincerely. "It only bothers us that we can't help you more. Your stopping here at such a time is the greatest honor this house." He too was overcome with emotion. "By the way, a letter came here for you while you were ill," he continued. "I opened it, which is a strange confession to make. Will you forgive me? The circumstances are peculiar. It is from Fielding." "Why should he write to me?" "A most lamentable thing has happened." The defense got hold of him. "He's a crank, said Ronnie lightly. "That's your way of putting it. But a man can be a crank without being a cad." "Miss Quested had better know how he behaved to you. If you don't tell her, somebody else will," he told her. "He is now the mainstay of the defense, I needn't add. He is the one righteous Englishman in a horde of tyrants. He receives deputations from the bazaar, and they all chew betel nut and smear one another's hands with scent. It is not easy to enter into the mind of such a man. His students are on strike. Out of enthusiasm for him, they won't learn their lessons. If it weren't for Fielding, one would never have had the Mahuram trouble. He has done a very grave disservice to the whole community. The letter lay here a day or two, waiting till you were well enough. Then the situation got so grave that I decided to open it in case it was useful to us." "Is it?" she said feebly. "Not at all. He only has the impertinence to suggest you have made a mistake.